All the way from the start, I can feel it in my heart, like all the way from the start.
Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today I want to talk about how to get rid of unwanted noise from your vocal recordings. Many of you out here have a lot of concerns about some more noticeable noise that happens in your vocals, and then there's some that's just very subtle that becomes more of an issue once we start processing the vocal, doing mixing, compression, EQ, all that type of stuff will ultimately make the noise more noticeable, and it's just really not a great look if you want to have the most professional vocals possible. So we're going to talk about first some preventative measures to take so that you can prevent the noise before you start recording, and that's going to make things a lot easier once you get into the DAW and start processing your vocal. We're also going to talk about some ways that you can at least help the noise if you've already recorded it, you have it, and you need to treat that a little bit. Let's talk about the first 3 ways that you are going to introduce noise into your vocal before you start recording. So the first way is just room noise. Now for me, my primary issue with room noise is I have some very bright lights. There's one in the back of the room that produces a buzzing sound. So generally if I'm recording something that's not a tutorial where I don't need the light, then that is off. So what you need to do is you need to walk around your room and become more aware of these things that are producing this unwanted noise. You may have heating boards, baseboards that are buzzing. You may have a refrigerator upstairs or something that is causing a little bit of a rumbling sound. You may have an AC unit. It could be a number of different things that are causing the noise. So you want to turn your mic on, put on a set of headphones, turn the gain up so that you have a really healthy signal going to the mic, and just walk around and just see where you can pick up on these types of things. Try to eliminate it. If you can't eliminate the noise, try to minimize it and keep your mic as far away from that as possible. So if you need to set up your mic across the room, away from the AC, you want to do that. So the second way that you can introduce noise into your vocal recording is either through the mic itself or through your preamp or audio interface. So certain mics are quieter than others. For example, I'm using this SM7B, which I generally use for my tutorials and my just spoken content, and it's actually one of the louder mics that I have. It requires a lot of gain. So I have something called a cloud lifter that provides about 20 dB of clean gain so that I'm not having to push the preamp as much. So the preamps themselves actually have a little bit of noise, and the higher you have to put up that preamp, some preamps will have a more noticeable noise than others. So be aware of the noise level of your mic. The best way to experiment with this is to try a couple different mics. For instance, again, the SM7B is the loudest mic I own. The quietest mic I own is the NT1 by Rode. It has very little to no self noise. I can't notice anything, even with the preamp jacked all the way up. It's very, very quiet. So you can just experiment and find out if it's the preamp that's producing the noise or if it's just one of your mics is louder than the other. But you want to get the cleanest preamp gain possible. So do a little research on your preamps and your audio interfaces and make sure that you're producing clean gain and not a very high noise to signal ratio. All right, so the third way that you may introduce noise into your vocal signal is just through some type of electrical issue. Now, there's a number of different things that can cause electrical issues around your studio, but the first would be you may just have some kind of component in your chain that is hooked up in the same outlet that is introducing some type of interference. For instance, the monitors, my main monitors, they're not electronically shielded as well as some of the other components in my studio, and so they produce a little bit of a hum, and I have to make sure to turn those off or I can actually hear that being introduced in my preamp. So those have got to be off. Things like that you want to notice, and that's really a matter of trial and error of unhooking everything, hooking up each thing individually. I have a keyboard that produces a little bit of a buzz. And I have these little things that I'm going to show you in just a second. It's called a Humex, and you can actually hook your 3-prong plug from your component into the Humex, then plug that into the wall, and that will help with ground loop. My computer is actually hooked up to one of these Humex. I was having a very strange ground loop sound. It almost sounded kind of like a cell phone interference with a lot of low-end rumble that was happening, and I had to hook up my iMac, my computer, into a Humex to get rid of that. So you may actually have some of that coming from the computer itself. So you want to check all the components one by one and see what could be causing a ground loop. So an absolute last resort is that you may have electrical issues in your studio or your house in terms of the wiring itself. Now that is not as easy as a fix. It's actually really expensive. You may have to hire an electrician to come and ensure that your home or your studio is properly grounded. I have not seen many cases where this has been the cause of the issue, but I have heard about it. It does happen. But most of the time, these things we're talking about, if you just treat everything and look at it very, very closely, individually, you can narrow down the problem and you're going to find a solution in these steps we've gone over. All right, so we've talked about how to prevent some of that noise in your vocal recording, but let's just say it's too late. You already have a noisy signal in one of your sessions and you want to try to treat it after the fact. It's a little bit more difficult to do, but there are some options. I want to talk about my favorite ways to treat noise and make it less noticeable. So let's go ahead and jump into Logic Pro. I'm going to show you a couple of ways that we can try to tame that after the fact. All right, so I've got a session here with a somewhat noisy vocal. I want to show you here in just a second, but the first thing I want to point out is that I actually have this control on my interface where we can do a little bit of processing on the signal going in. So a lot of you have probably noticed that when I'm quiet, it's silent. So I'm using a noise gate on the dynamics section here going into my interface. Now, if I turn the noise gate off, that is the noise of my hard drives, my computer, and a little bit of white noise that is produced by the actual microphone. So then if I gate that out, this can be really useful for you when you're recording your vocal. It just makes it less noticeable when that noise is not present whenever I'm not speaking or singing or rapping or whatever it is I'm doing. Now, I would recommend that if you're not just doing something like this where I'm recording a screen capture, if you're recording, a vocal that you're going to be mixing later, I would do the noise gate after the fact. So you would just leave that off, and then once we get into the DAW itself, then we can do the same thing, but you don't want to get hasty with this noise gate going in, because sometimes if you don't set the threshold right, there might be a little bit of a rasp at the end of a phrase or something, or just a little subtlety in a performance that's a little softer than the rest that may get cut out with a noise gate that's going in on your recording chain. So just leave that flexible for the mixing process in the DAW. Now, let me show you just a vocal that was recorded just like this, right next to my computer. A lot of hard drive noise. And let me just solo that for you. I've been trying to find myself in all the wrong places, calling out for love to all the wrong faces. Oh yeah, what you see ain't what you get. Sometimes back in '09 left me feeling like I'm dying. Never again, never. You're left counting down the hours. Gotta find that love. Left counting down the hours. So you can hear the noise in the vocal. And what I like to do is use this tool called NS1 from Waves. And let me just play this back. This is without it. Again, never give someone that much power that when it goes sour, you're left counting down the hours. Gotta find that love deep down in yourself. It's on you to find your purpose. It ain't up to no one else. So now when I turn that on, and never give someone that much power that when it goes sour, you're left counting down the hours. Gotta find that love deep down in yourself. It's on you to find your purpose. It ain't up to no one else. And I'm breathing a deep sigh that I made it out your clutches. I'm wishing you the best, but you can't tell me nothing. So it actually takes out a little bit of the room noise as well as some of the hard drive noise and the hiss on top. So a very useful tool, and there's a lot of other types of noise suppressors out there. This is just the one that I tend to use the most. There's some incredible technologies that can take this stuff out of recordings, but generally, something really simple like this and a noise gate is all I need. And the key here being that if you do all the preventative things we talked about, you don't have to do as much work in post. Of course, there's going to be situations where that's just not possible. You're in less than ideal environments and you can't treat the noise until after. But if you can, it's going to make your job a lot easier so that you don't have to be in here doing a lot of science experiments to get rid of the noise from your signal. All right, y'all, so that's a couple of ways that you can both prevent and treat noise in your vocal recordings. The key here is you need to experiment. I've spent sometimes hours and hours over a couple of days trying to narrow down the source of a ground loop or a white noise that was being introduced to my signal somewhere. And sometimes it can really be difficult to find, but you have to just unplug things and try different mics, figure out the way your preamp is behaving, if it's producing noise. Different components together are going to produce some noise. Your room may have some noise. There's a plane flying overhead right now that you can probably hear. So all these things, you just have to be aware of them. And hopefully this helps y'all. If you have any questions or comments about noise in your vocal recordings, leave them below. If you learned anything in the video, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.